Hey, everybody, and welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at AI
Oh, yeah.
and when to use it, and maybe even more importantly, when you should probably just steer clear.
It's a question we get all the time these days, right? I mean, AI is everywhere you look.
Yeah, it really,
And I think it's really easy to just kind of get caught up in all the hype.
for sure, for sure. And that's why I'm really excited about this deep dive. We're going to be taking a close look at an article that was recommended to us by Curt Robbins,
Oh, cool.
who is a senior technical writer. The article is called 15 Times to Use AI and 5 Not to.
Catchy title.
It is. It's by Ethan Mollick. And it was
Okay.
published on December 9th, 2024. So it's really recent.
Yeah, very timely.
Yeah.
So what's really interesting about this article is that Mollick doesn't just give us like a list of what to do and what not to do. He
Yeah.
actually digs into the why, which I think is super valuable.
Okay, so let's jump right in. One of the areas where Mollick says AI really shines is when you need quantity more than quality.
Okay.
Like when you're brainstorming product ideas for a new software feature. Let's say you can only come up with a handful of ideas. AI can generate hundreds of possibilities.
It's like having a brainstorming partner who never runs out of steam.
Right. And what's interesting is that this abundance of ideas can actually lead you to new ways of thinking that you might not have considered before.
Well, that's a good point. It's not just about the number of ideas.
Yeah.
It's about using AI to break out of our normal ways of
Yeah,
thinking
exactly.
and exploring new possibilities. And speaking of exploring, Malik also talks about how AI can be a really powerful tool when you're dealing with complex tasks,
Right?
especially if you're already an expert and you can critically evaluate what AI comes up with.
Like, think of it as a superpowered research assistant. So imagine you're writing a white paper on some super technical topic. AI can go through mountains of research papers, articles, data, you name it, pull out the key insights and summarize them for you. That sounds amazing, especially when you're dealing with tight deadlines and you've got information overload.
For sure.
But this brings up a question that I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about. Can AI replace human expertise?
That's the big question, isn't it? And the answer is no, not at all. In fact, Malik says that AI works best when it's used to help us with what we're already good at, not to replace us completely.
Yeah, so it's more like a partnership.
Yeah, exactly. So, for example, AI is great at summarizing information, but it's not perfect. It can miss important details or misinterpret things.
So we still need to double check everything, right?
Absolutely. Fact checking is super important, especially when we're dealing with complex or technical information. That's where experience and expertise really come into play.
Okay, that makes sense. It's all about using AI as a tool to make us better at what we do, not just blindly trusting it to do the job for us.
Right.
Now, another area where Malik says AI can be super helpful is translation. Let's say you've written a detailed technical policy document, and you need to create different training materials for different audiences.
Right.
AI can take that document and transform it effortlessly.
Yeah, it's like having a whole team of writers at your disposal. And this actually leads to another benefit that Malik talks about, which is using AI to keep those creative juices flowing. You know, we all hit those walls sometimes when the words just won't come out right. AI can help us get past those roadblocks by suggesting different ways to write a sentence or a paragraph or even a whole section.
It's like having a brainstorming buddy for your writing.
Exactly.
And I think that's a really important point. AI can be a collaborator, not just a machine that does stuff for us.
Right.
It can help us think differently, push our boundaries, and maybe even have some fun in the process.
Totally. I love that. So we've talked about a lot of positives, but Malik also doesn't shy away from talking about AI's limitations.
Right, because no tool is perfect.
Yeah, and it's important to understand what those limitations are so we can use AI effectively.
For sure. So what are some of the things we should be watching out for?
Well, one of the big ones that Malik talks about is the danger of relying too much on AI for learning.
Oh, interesting.
Just because an AI can summarize something complicated doesn't mean you've actually learned anything.
That's true. It's tempting to think that AI can do the learning for us, but deep down, we know that real learning comes from actually engaging with the material, asking questions, making connections ourselves.
You got it. It's about grappling with those ideas, wrestling with those concepts, and coming to your conclusions. AI can be a helpful tool, but it shouldn't replace real thinking.
So it's not about replacing expertise, it's about enhancing it.
Precisely. Now, another potential pitfall that Malik brings up is what he calls the hallucination hazard.
Hallucination hazard. That sounds a little scary.
Well, it can be. This is when AI generates output that sounds totally plausible but is actually completely wrong or nonsensical.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely something to watch out for, especially when we're dealing with technical information where accuracy is so important.
Absolutely. And what makes this even trickier is that AI errors don't always look like human errors.
Oh, that's interesting.
They can be really convincing even to an expert.
So how do we protect ourselves from these AI hallucinations?
Malik emphasizes the importance of being critical of what we see, honing our fact-checking skills, and understanding how AI makes mistakes. Now, another interesting point that Mollick makes is that sometimes struggling with a problem is actually really important for learning.
Oh, that's counterintuitive. It seems like AI should make things easier, not harder.
It might seem that way, but Mollick talks about the value of effort, of wrestling with ideas, trying different things, even making mistakes along the way.
Uh-huh.
He says it's through that process that we often have those aha moments.
So even though AI can be tempting, it's good to remember that sometimes we need to roll up our sleeves and do the hard work ourselves.
Exactly. It's like taking a shortcut versus actually exploring a new path. The shortcut might get you there faster, but the exploration is where you discover something new, where you make those connections and really understand what you're doing.
Okay, so AI is a tool, not a replacement for hard work and critical thinking.
You got it. And speaking of exploring new paths, Moloch reminds us that AI is a moving target.
What do you mean?
What works today might not work tomorrow. It's constantly evolving.
That's a good point. We need to stay flexible.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to experiment, learn from others, and share what we discover. This whole field is changing so rapidly that we need to be able to adapt and refine our approach as we go.
So AI isn't a magic bullet.
Nope,
It's something we need to use carefully and thoughtfully,
for sure.
and we need to be willing to keep learning and adapting.
Exactly. And all of this is especially relevant for our audience of technical writers, documentation specialists, IT professionals, people who need to be able to communicate complex information clearly and accurately.
Absolutely. So for everyone listening who's thinking about using AI in their work, what are some of the key things to remember from Mollick's article?
I think the biggest takeaway is that it's important to understand both the power and the limitations of AI,
Uh-huh.
knowing when to leverage its strengths for things like brainstorming, summarizing, translating, and knowing when to rely on human expertise for things like critical thinking, deep learning, and ensuring accuracy.
It's all about finding that sweet spot where AI can help us without replacing those essential human skills.
You got it. And remembering that AI is a tool, not a replacement for what we're already good at. We need to be the ones in control, making smart decisions about how and when to use it.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance, right? That sweet spot where AI can make us more efficient and creative without losing those human elements that are so important.
Right. And, speaking of efficiency, Malik talks about how AI can be really helpful for those tasks that we all kind of dread, like those super standardized reports that nobody really reads.
Oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Those reports can be such a time suck.
They can. And Malik's point is that AI can actually help us streamline these tasks
Interesting.
so we can free up our time and energy for the stuff that really matters.
Okay, but doesn't that raise some concerns? I mean, if we automate all the boring stuff, what happens to the value of human work?
That's a great question, and it's something we need to think carefully about. We don't want to sacrifice quality or meaning just for the sake of speed. But if AI can help us get rid of those soul-crushing tasks that nobody enjoys, maybe that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, maybe it frees us up to focus on the stuff that actually makes a difference.
Exactly. And I think this speaks to the bigger picture of how AI is changing the way we work. It's not about humans versus machines.
Right.
It's about finding ways for humans and machines to work together more effectively.
To complement each other's strengths and create something better than either one could do alone.
Exactly. And for me, that's what makes this whole AI conversation so fascinating. It's forcing us to really rethink our assumptions about work and creativity and what it means to be human in a world where technology is becoming more and more advanced.
It's challenging us to adapt, to learn new skills, and to embrace new ways of thinking.
For sure. And as Moloch points out, it's a journey that we're all on together, figuring things out as we go.
And that's where I think the power of community comes in.
Totally.
Sharing our experiences, our insights, our successes, and even our failures so we can all learn from each other.
Absolutely. And remember, this whole conversation started with a suggestion from Curt Robbins, a senior technical writer.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Clearly, he and a lot of other people in our field are already thinking about how AI was going to impact their work.
And that's encouraging, right? Because the future of AI isn't something that's being done to us.
Right.
It's something that we're all creating together.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important message. It means we have a voice, we have agency, and we can help shape how AI is used in our field and beyond.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'd love to leave our listeners with a question to think about.
Okay, go for it.
How can you experiment with AI in a way that feels safe and manageable? What are some small steps you can take to explore its strengths and weaknesses in your own work?
I love that. Maybe try using AI to generate some different headlines for your next technical document.
Okay.
Or use it to summarize a long research paper that you need to get through.
Oh, that's a good one.
Or even just ask AI to rephrase a sentence that you're struggling with to see if it can come up with something clearer and more concise.
Those are great ideas. It's about starting small, being curious, and remembering that Learning to work with AI is a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. And it's a journey we're all on together. So we want to hear from you, our listeners. Share your experiences, your insights, your haha moments with us and with the wider community.
The more we learn from each other, the better equipped we'll be to navigate this crazy world of AI and use it to enhance our work and our lives.
Couldn't agree more. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those questions coming.